Hello and welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. I have been looking forward to today's discussion. Raul Hernandez Ocho here with us today, founder of Do Good Work. He is a specialist when it comes to bootstrap startups, founders, build systems around productization, for packaging, for selling, 5Xing pricing, 5Xing revenue. We're going to learn about the exact formulas in an organic conversation here today with Raul. Raul, thanks for joining.
All organic, grass-fed, grass-finished, Jason. Here we are.
Absolutely. No preservatives.
No preservative, no GMO.
Well, Raul, as an agency owner, and I know you specialize working with marketing agencies among other bootstrap service companies, I have so many questions for you and notes to share, but definitely want to start with your history, your story, your background, and how you got into this line of work.
It was a little bit, I don't want to say by accident, but wasn't intentional, put it that way. Tried to start a software company, and that led, so I was working in finance and JP Morgan retail side, and got into a program online, met a dude from New York. I'm in San Diego, so remote, back in the Skype days, if you remember those. And we started networking, saying, hey, let's conquer a niche together. We started working together. Let's build out a SaaS. We figured that out. But the niche that we wanted to approach needed marketing help. So I'm like, okay, let's figure out marketing. So we figured out the marketing piece, started selling marketing. That took me out of the day job. We had a small little boutique services agency. I pulled up the spreadsheet, think last year. This was years ago, but I pulled up the spreadsheet. How many clients did we have? I think I had like 19. So it was a very small boutique, just a nice little shop. But it turned out it didn't want to be what we wanted to build at that time. So I went on to help other agencies online, some for mergers, to acquisitions, to helping run the training side. And then there was a bigger acquisition of the agency where I was helping them operate day to day and helping train and coach their members and some of their coaching students. And in that agency, we almost tripled it in less than a year, from 7 people to 24 people. And that's where a coach of mine mentioned, hey, you should write that down. I'm like, what do you mean write it down? Just write it down. Like, what am I going to write down? Wrote it down, a simple principles around the book. That's where the first book was published. And I'm like, oh, maybe I can do this for a living. So I started doing consulting and coaching for, I would say, service providers, not just agencies, but they're service providers that have a team that turns into an agency. To some of the one dude who spent the most on LinkedIn in the entire world, one guy who was sleeping under his desk one day, and then selling for a living. And then we helped him scale it up to now he's doing like 6 figures a month. So it's been really fun to be able to help with clients look at what does it take to scale from a principle standpoint, not just tactics or, you see a lot of trainings online for 7-figure agency growth. It's all about how to get more marketing and sales. But what does it take to systemize? What does it take to productize? How do you build a team, a culture? How do you actually have protection in terms of growth and not just all go, go, go? And that's kind of where we're at right now. And it's been really fun doing the practice of actually doing go-to-market strategies for clients and then working with agency owners to help them increase their profits and help them hit their life goals.
Which is a difficult thing to do. You look at how many agencies there are nationwide here in the US, let alone in San Diego, where you're based out of, or here in LA, where we're based out of, even Marina Del Rey, where we're really headquartered at. How does an agency stand out from another group who may specialize in their field? And I don't want to go too far down that road of niches, specializations just yet. But how do they differentiate? Whether we're talking about client experience, the productization, as you mentioned, how can they set themselves apart and position for more business than another agency or service provider in their field?
This is a great question, and I'll give you real examples here. One guy asked the exact same piece. He's a B2B SaaS digital marketing agency. I'm not sure what they specialize in, but he's saying, how do I compete? Because the client's saying, well, what makes you different? Everyone does data-driven decision. Everyone has strategy. Everyone has a nice team, like yada, yada. Don't be an agency. Don't position yourself as another agency. Because if you create that category, then you're just comparing 2 dots. Like, okay, which one's cheaper? Which one will jump higher? Which one's cooler? Which one sends me the coffee mug when I have the sales call with them? Like, you don't want to do that. You want to position around either the problem that you're solving, the transformation that you're making, or the unique factor of how you're getting to that core outcome. We can dive into that, but I think that there is, when you look on LinkedIn right now, I looked up digital marketing agency. I looked up founder within like the geographic. Every single website was like a copy and paste website. We do SEO, we do this, we do that, we do this, we jump this side, we say this, we high five our team. Like, great. What are you gonna do for me? And we have to be very specific to a very important someone. If not, we're just gonna get lost in the crowd. So I run a cohort of agencies to help them grow. I call it like the agency gym. You come in, we do work, make the gains that you want to gain for your life and for the business. One of the guys, he specializes in the hotel industry. He specializes to help them grow, even during COVID. Like, he made it happen. That was freaking awesome. But he was seen right now with his current clients as a media buyer, or just like as an agency that does one specific thing. And we strategize, how do you get yourself out of that conversation of just being seen as one vendor, one key thing, and being seen as a strategic partner? A few conversations later, the talk with the client, 2 days preparation, 6-month bigger agreement, higher agency of a retainer rate, and a profit share. Because he changed the conversation and started focusing on the outcome, and he's talking to his ideal client's inner desires versus, here's what work we'll do for you. Here's how much that's going to cost. Here's our hourly rate. Here's our hands that you can hire out at a rate. And no one, like, never sell the hands. And we can talk about the pitfalls of that, but it's all around, what are your clients, your ideal clients care for? What is that key pain point? How do you position that differently? How do you position yourself as a partner versus just a provider in terms of getting that key outcome? Because then when you're selling, it's not really selling, you're giving money at a discount. You can get this outcome for this little investment. The value is more than what you're paying for.
So coming on board as that partner provider, having the end goal featured, because that's really what they're buying. They don't want SEO, they don't want traffic as much as they want the revenue, the growth. In my experience, we're working on investor marketing campaigns where it's the goal of their fundraise. We can help you raise $5 million. 5 million. That's what we're doing. We're going after that. Not, hey, we're going to launch ads and they're going to look great. Oh, you don't want branding. You want direct response. You want those results. That took somewhat of a shift and being able to speak to that. And then I love the idea of partner, because some agencies can oversell and say, oh, we're going to get you, 30x in the first week. Trust us. Let's get it started.
It's scary. Yeah.
We get a bad rap. We get a bad name. I find just by doing what we say, we position ourselves beyond other agencies in many situations. But that goes true for many businesses, not just agencies. But setting realistic goals, setting realistic paths, and talking about that path as a partnership. Perhaps showing some skin in the game, but either way, speaking transparently about what it means to work with them long term. Our growth is around our clients' growth. We bring in a bunch of clients, they're with us for a few months, they leave, doesn't really get us anywhere. We're able to build these long relationships. We're able to optimize. We're not hitting goals right out of the gate. Here's what we're going to do. I've found that to make all of the difference in those discussions.
Oh yeah, and that's the cool part too. And then, like, how do you look at it when you're basing it off of value? Like, how do you price? Like, let's say I'm an investor and I want to raise a fund, or it's a seed fund or a Series A. It's like a portfolio company, or I'm in the private equity. How do you position what you're doing based on the value versus on the cost of hands and services? How are you doing that?
So for us, it all comes down to the return on ad spend. Meaning, if it's a 10x return on ad spend on average for the industry, 10% cost of capital, if groups are spending $100K in advertising to raise $1 million, and we have, of course, case studies where it's 5 times that and 20K per million. But talking about some averages, when performance is there, we talk about all the variables and what to change up for audiences, messaging, funnel if it's not converting. But being able to speak to these groups on a regular basis, those are the metrics that stick with them. That's the value. That's how they're able to justify it. We talked about starting points, how it scales as performance is there. And that usually sets a good foundation for the partnership. Working with some groups on their later rounds right now, one group on their 6th round, other groups on their 2nd and 3rd, but being able to speak to that value has made all the difference.
No, I love that. And it gives you that authority, and you're looking at it from a quarterly basis or like a long range basis versus, here's what I'm going to do for the first 2 months or 3 months. And it's like, here's like the first quarter Q2 is what we want to hit, Q3. So you're future pacing, it sounds like, but it's also, you're having a different kind of conversation versus we're going to do 9 posts for you this month, 7 emails next month, and then SEO the month third. Like, no one wants that. No one cares about that.
Yeah, they want to skip to the performance stages. If I have the 8-point plan and written about in forums, lead workshops on this whole model, and if I say this is what we're doing during these phases, they usually just want to hop to the advertising. I have to explain the importance, streamline it, show how it is the setup and the right place for the agency client relationship to start. But I'm always looking for better ways to do things. I know you work with groups around productive profit strategies and really focus on margins. It's difficult for an agency and with aggressive competition out there, even for a niche vertical like mine, to be able to price this where it's easy enough for an early stage business to get started, which majority of businesses are startups, and in those small business categories, I should say, not startups, but small business. So, finding that blend of the right pricing for a client, also the right margins, the right profitability, to bring on more talent, bring on more resources, bring on more tools, be able to grow and scale as a business. How do you design a high profit digital marketing agency or any service providing company for that matter from the ground up?
I like to break the business model into 2 components. So we call them expenses, or your finance person I call them investments. Your investments that go to the business, that'll be your overhead, obviously, like the office space, the software, whatever you need to fund and have the business run great. But then you have an expense or an investment into the team, and I call them task units, or you can call them pods, that are strategically designed to focus and allocate to a very specific number of clients. And when you look at it that way, it's like a portfolio. These are my salaries. It could be 50, 100 grand a month in salaries for these people. Could be we'll talk about the genetic makeup of that group, but they're managing 150, 200,000, 300,000 in revenue for that pod. And the way that you break it down is you have to identify your average number of clients that you manage, your average revenue per client. So you get true cost, not just like fake cost, like what I wish it would be. And then your total overhead per client. So if you know that this pod can manage, for example, say 10 clients, so you multiply the overhead times 10, add that to their costs. And then seeing based on the variables that you now control, you control 4 variables: your average revenue, your pricing, the number of clients that you want to work with, your labor efficiency, and your overhead costs. So I'm not going to be the guy that say cut costs to scale. Like, I'm not the finance guy or the accounting guy, but I will tell you, you can be more effective with the resources you have. But if you see that pod there, I like to structure them that way and create multiple pods within an agency so you can scale pods pretty easily. I mean, nothing is easy, but it's not complicated. I don't pretend to be smarter than I am, and I only teach what I do. So this is what works. But you can scale the pods pretty easily, either by duplication and or by going horizontal, adding more people to manage, or vertically adding more clients per person. And the genetic makeup I like to create within these pods, these aren't positions, these are more like characteristics of people, is a driver who manages and leads the pod. It could be a director, it could be a strategist. They are client facing, LTV driven. They focus on the relationship, focus on strategy, help the team within them. Then you have an operator, could be a project manager, account manager that works within all the clients. The ships are running on time, the checklists are made, the deadlines are due, everything is running well. Then you have your specialists, the very specific people who are day in, day out in the trenches. For in your case, it could be the media buyers, the PPC specialists, the funnel builders, tech, whatever, copywriters within that pod. And you just need to know what's the size of the pod that makes sense and how many clients can they manage and what's their true capacity. And when you look at it that way, you want to play around with the numbers again: average revenue per client, the number of clients that you serve, your labor efficiencies, what's your cost of the pod, and your overhead costs, to get to what I like to get to, a margin of at least 30%. Now, is this a fake thing where you can't do it? I know it's not easy. I know that it's sometimes difficult, especially in the beginning of these first 2 quarters. And I think last Q3 and Q4 last year, a little bit wonky, difficult, like margins were up and down, maybe 10%, 8% margins. I get it, it's real. But I also understand and right now, similar markets, like I have people who have 50% profitability. They're leveraging AI, offshore, and part-time workers. 50 to 60% margins. Because they productize their service, it became very effective, and their positioning is different. But this is competing on the invisible on your business model front. And when you look at it that way, when you have a working model that's within the profitability that you want, then you say, what is the minimum pricing I have to guarantee profit for my team today? And that pricing, the way that I like to do pitching and selling, essentially I really don't sell, I just do discovery and give options, is I make that option the lowest price option on the menu. So they get to choose the premium, the first class, and then the average, and never going below my minimum level of profitability, and positioning it that way and looking for the problems or in the marketplace or in the niches that I'm serving, whose problems and the solutions to the problem are worth to what they can pay for, what they're paying for. So that's how I balance it out on the business model front and on positioning on the selling front.
We have a lot of similarities. We have the pod model, discovery calls, soft selling in terms of education, with the closing rates that we get from referral partners, and in general, it makes value for any call we take. So I basically say, hey, if we take on 2, 3 more of the discovery calls that we perform as clients in a short period of time, others come back later when they're funded, we can cover everything and therefore be consultants on all of the calls and be discovery mode, talk about what they could do, whether we do it, whether they do pieces of it in-house, whether they do all of it, another agency, whatever it may be. I found it to be excellent for relationship building and fulfilling, because you're telling them things that could actually benefit their growth. Then taking that to the pods and have it written down here where you're mentioning a strategist, operator, and then specialists. I've found some obstacles in terms of scaling up and down around specialists, strategists, operators. We use a little bit different language, but around their expertise. So, hey, this specialist does great with this vertical of client, even with the same initiative of fundraising for us, or this account manager, which would be a blend of the strategist and operator. We have content marketer, it's more of the operator, but it's blend. This content marketer has fewer accounts right now, but really has these other ones in planning, or we found some obstacles of fluctuation that could affect margin unless the pod is full. But I love the pod model for that reason, and being able to scale up, scale down, which is a big part of what you work with businesses on, I know, is crucial. I'm curious just to speak to pricing a little bit more, if you've seen any trends in the agency space, such as agency fees outside of ad management fees, or influencer packages that are more around outreach and don't involve influencer payments. Anything that you've seen to be groundbreaking over the past couple of years? Because like you said, it's definitely been a flux since early 2022, really feeling it second half of 2022 in given industries and just seeing the market. But around news events around February 2022, that seemed to have slowed down some of the growth that was occurring 2020, 2021 around many industries. Have you seen anything in the agency space or even consulting? I mean, you're talking about different ways to productize. So, quarterbacking versus consulting, selling packages versus selling time. Anything creative that you think listeners could maybe look to adopt into their own model, or just be aware of that. There is some pricing that's occurring that way in the space.
Interesting. I'm not sure if it's creative, because I think like it's all either there or obvious, but I'll just tell you what I've seen, frankly. The one thing I don't like is the thing, just to preface it, when people just have a flat retainer fee and they don't know how they arrived to that number. Like, that's a big no-no. What I've seen work differently, and this is more on the agency or the media buy agencies where they do funnel builds, and then they also add on like fractional CMO services. So I've seen it be pretty interesting where if they need to have some sort of prelim build, funnel tech, MarTech, tracking, segmetric, whatever it needs to be on the back end, scoping that out as its own project and giving preferred pricing if they latch that on to a service month 3, month 4. So I've seen that be pretty strategic. Also, because when you're doing builds, people feel like it's a lag, or clients just feel like, well, what's the value, right? I can't see the invisible. And you never really see a funnel, it's digital. Adding the consulting component there to figure out where can you pull profit from there, upgrades, referrals, win backs, OpEx, sales volume, pricing, LTV. So looking at the profit levers. So that's one thing that's interesting. Not selling time though. I hate selling time, because if you ever sell time, you're going to be time poor. I like selling it on value and packaging it together where at the end of the day, you are selling time, because it's your time invested, but you're not positioning it as time to the client. One thing that I think that I'm honestly going through right now, so I consult go-to-market strategy for membership groups or private clients that I frankly love. And we hire their agencies, we figure out what's going on, whatever. And we got a new deck or proposal for Q3, Q4. And this deck is exactly what not to do. Like, and I can go through that, like what they're doing. They're literally listing out specifically, here's what we're doing for email. Here's what we're doing for social. Here's what we're doing for paid ads. Here's what we're doing for your special events. And they're listing out, we'll post 9 times, we'll send 7 emails, we'll set up an automation, and putting a price dollar amount towards that. And when you see that, you naturally, and I shared it with, like, I'm sharing it here, but when you see that, you naturally look at it, you're like, well, this gives me an a la carte menu of what to choose and what to not choose, because now it's a price war. How can I get the most value for the lowest price? And that's a trend that I frankly dislike. I'm also not a big fan of, and this is, again, could be a controversy, I'm not a big fan of percentage of ad spend. Sometimes people do that, and that's great. I mean, I've had, and I'm sure if I can say the names, but like mall, like shopping mall, the ones in Marina Del Rey or here in La Jolla, brands, big brands, pay my clients in advance for the quarter, and they just got paid on a percentage of ad spend. So that's a huge deal, right? And that's great. You can make really good money with that. But I'd rather turn it and figure out, how can we be seen as a revenue driver versus a expense center? And typically when they spend, when agencies say we need to increase your ad spend, is it in your best interest or is it in the agency's best interest? So I always like to look at performance and hitting milestones or KPIs that we can influence as an agency, and unlocking profit, rev share, or if you do profit shares, depending on the client. If that's, again, legal, I'm not sure with the fundraising space,
Right.
looking at that. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I've seen anything creative. I just think that offer creation and packaging what you can do towards what the client needs and get creative, that's where I think you can differentiate and be paid your worth versus just be paid as a commodity.
Sure. Sure. I like service deliverables. I want to be able to check everything off and make sure that it's not based on perspective, but everything was set up that may deal with, my wife's a lawyer. We have a partner since the early days of the business who has helped us phrase everything so that there's not those misconceptions. So, for whether it's content marketing deliverable or advertising, being able to have deliverables, I've found to be very beneficial for both sides. We definitely work on percentage of ad spend. We can't take a success fee of security sales as we're not a broker dealer, but I find it to accomplish exactly what you just said. So I don't think it's actually disagreeing. And when we're talking about all this with clients, with founders that listen in, this isn't just how to be opportunistic as an agency. I think it's quite the opposite. It's how to set up a fair partnership, a fair model across the board. And I really look at business as the monetization of value. So we should not be charging for anything that is not physically of value to the client. Otherwise,
Oh
it's
yeah.
a matter of time before they stop with us, or worse. And reputation is very important in this space. So we want to make sure we're able to justify anything we talk about. So if we start with, let's say, an intro level ad spend to a client, I can't charge the same type of ad management fees that I would for a larger client, and therefore do the same amount of work. For a larger client, we may be doing an extreme amount of creatives and variants of each ad. We may be doing data mining. We may be building more landing pages to funnel in each of the traffic sources from each channel and each audience. There's more to be done in scale. So we have a percentage of ad spend that is a lower entry point. And then the client's really only scaling that ad spend. Now, this may be different because I work with small businesses. So they're not saying, hey, here's a percentage of our $10 million ad budget for the quarter, as much as here's a starting ad budget. We have it planned out for a few months, but really, working in that game, one ad budget has to produce the next. So as we're performing, as I'm able to show them, here's what's coming up on the pixel data. We could buy more of this traffic next week. If it's performing at similar levels, we could continue to increase things here instead of us having to go back to the client and say, hey, now we think we're worth this amount, or now we're going to charge you this additional advertising package. It's completely focused on marketing.
It's value based because it's returns. You're doing on returns.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
Key.
So I think we definitely agree on that. And then as it goes to higher levels, again, we're set up, the client set up, they know they're getting their value. If they want to scale it back down, absolutely. They don't have a commitment to us to keep it at that level as much as keep the deal in place. And even that we're, flexible around. You mentioned, fractional CMO, and I know a lot of agencies these days working with earlier stage that are more month to month, and you're able to base it on that value because of it. I find it to be a bit difficult because, you want to paint the bigger picture. So the wrong founder looking at a down month can look to change things up and cancel it. And then, of course, the connection of all of this to the team, because we want to make sure the team is operating at full ability, full capacity, bringing their actual talent to it. The world's obviously changed over the past few years. Remote work has become the standard since 2020. More hybrid models, I think, are hopefully trending in that direction. I do see the value of summits and some type of in-person interaction weekly if team members are local. But I definitely know agencies have reduced costs by outsourcing. I definitely know agencies have been able to staff more and had to increase costs, and we're more value driven, so increase costs. But the whole topic of remote work, I know this is something that you've specialized in. You've built great systems. How do you go about it? We're always looking to improve what we do. I always question, is there a group in some other area of the country or the world that could do a better job that's in person all day long? I know you've worked with companies from 5 people to 200 people on outsource models. You've talked about heroic leadership among remote teams. What are the best approaches to this concept, whether it's for agencies, service providers, or anybody listening in?
No, absolutely. I do want to add, though, on your previous note that
please.
My presumption is that we're all ethical and that we're selling something of value. So this is in no way to like you mentioned, it's 100% to get to their goals.
Exactly.
And if you're not selling something that gets results, like get out.
I know you and I know it. I just wanted to emphasize it to the audience. I'm glad you are as well too.
Yeah.
That is what it's all based on for service-based business.
We just have to help people get their goals and just do well, and you can get rewarded pretty handsomely for just doing that and caring. So these strategies and tactics are, how do we, because sometimes marketing is the first thing to get cut, which baffles me. I still don't understand, but like, why is that? How do we paint a better picture? There is a lot of not good marketers out there. I won't say any words or names, but like, how do we position and still help people win? And that win is a huge win compared to like the investment to work with you. So that's just the only picture I wanted to paint there. Dude, remote work is a hot topic. I remember helping this. They were in Utah. They're still in Utah. A team. They were in office. Great guy. He's known for what he does in his industry, like number one spender in the world. And I'm like, your team's asking to work from home. This was before the whole 2020 stuff. It's like 2019. It's like, your team is asking to ask like hybrid days. Like, why don't we just set you up as if you were a remote team? Okay, we set it up, did it, and then everything happened, and they were primed, positioned. So remote work takes a lot of intention from the founder and leader, because over communication is normal communication with remote work. I like to look at a few principles around what makes it feasible to do work any day. So as a digital leader, because we're no longer in the physical office, we have to become a digital leader. There's essentially what I call the trifecta, 3 things for digital work: solid communications, a place to drive all the actions, and a place to have all the information. I call that like creating your HQ. Essentially, you're creating a brain for your company. And we already have that. We already know that, right? But how do you intentionally bring things together instead of, hey, where's that PDF? Check the Slack, email, ping, WhatsApp, like centralizing all information, communication, and action. Because your number one KPI as a leader is to shorten the gap between information and doing. That's your KPI. When we look at remote work, if we're looking at communication, there's two lines of communication that happens in person and remote: vertical and horizontal. Vertical, top down, is going to be within teams, silos, which is okay as long as you break the silos with horizontal communication. So you might have different teams like SEO specialists, copywriters, funnel tech, analytics. You might have your media buyers, your Facebook people, your Google people. They can be vertical and they're focused on perfecting their craft. But you also need a leadership tier. Who's the leader within each pod? And then who is the leader of the leaders? The C-suite, you, founder. And being intentional of how to drive communication using whatever tool. I don't care what tool you use, but if you leverage those lines of communication and set a cadence, a heartbeat to the company with the daily check-ins and or weekly live calls. Some teams do daily live calls, but a weekly live call per department, and then a one weekly horizontally with all the updates. And same thing if you're using Slack, horizontal and vertical. And the key is maintaining that consistency and that heartbeat and knowing that over communication is communication. 1 to 2 days of a lag of no communication kills productivity remotely. So making sure that you set expectations. If you're going to talk to me, I might not respond until tomorrow. Okay, that's cool. Then now I know, and I can get back to work. But I think it's just setting up that foundational base, that infrastructure first, before you go buying the latest enterprise software for your remote team or buying this cool little plugin for Zoom. Like that stuff doesn't matter. Like you can do exceptionally well with Basecamp, Slack, what's that Facebook one? ClickUp, whichever ones you want to use. It doesn't matter. But
I think it's the Facebook one. Yeah. We use Monday and Slack. Awesome recommendations. I really like the way you broke that down and the structures. What type of obstacles do you see groups getting into, and when they have all that in place, and how do you go about solving that? Because like you said, 2 days and no communication really affects the flow. Different SOPs, standard operating procedures, that are ignored, and maybe it's not seen by management, upper management, and that shouldn't happen by design, but it does in different organizations. I've seen CRMs, I've seen different softwares that took a long time to set up, completely ignored,
disregarded.
Disregarded. What is the, whether it's that or just a company that sees value in these structures but is always trying to improve their remote work structure. What are the best ways to go about that, to review what's being done, to change anything that needs to occur? We added a few extra calls based on your structure. Like we have the daily, but everything else is to a T, what you just said. And we didn't want to do that at first, and we see value for our team in it. Again, I want to make sure we're better than the group that's in person all day. And if we're running obstacles that I think wouldn't exist if we were in person, hey, I want to take extra action around it. So I think each group has the opportunity to customize it for themselves a little bit. What have you seen to be the most effective there in terms of bringing out those new additions to the model?
Absolutely. So you talked about the core pitfalls. Silos are a pitfall, but setting up the structure can break the silos. I like doing asynchronous, either weekly or daily check-ins. Here's what I did. Here's the wins. Here's what I'm doing today. Here's what I need your support with. And then driving for action every single day, and always having a team or a department measured to a KPI. This goes back to the core operations structure that I focus on, is what are the key operating KPIs for your company? Not like the 135 metrics that are on your spreadsheet, but like the 9 to 12 that are key critical leading indicators. And having the team measure, here's the KPI, here's what we're doing, here's what we did, here's our current performance. So as a leader in skimming this in Slack, You can say, okay, we're good on this, we're good on that. Oh, they're struggling with that KPI. Now I know who I need to support next week. And now it's like something is either going on, they don't have the right training, they don't have the right support. So just keeping that up to date when you're working with the team internally. The other thing too, and this is probably the number one request that I've had, and I wrote a free blog and a book for it because everyone I've asked, like I've just sent it to them, is how to structure your day to be more intentional, because no one teaches you how to work remote. You come in and then it's a fire on your email, it's a fire on your Slack. You got all these client calls. We end up as Zoom zombies. Like no one wants to be on calls if they don't have to be on calls. So my goal is like, what are the essential calls that you need to be on? How do you cut unnecessary calls and replace it with asynchronous communication? And how do you build relationship on calls? But also, how do you show up to your day? How do you structure your day in a certain format where you're intentional with your morning, personal time, intentional with creation? If that's you're building an ad set, you're building a funnel, you're writing, you're posting, you're scheduling, and then having a section of your day to be focused on intaking the meetings, intaking the stressors, the pings, the Slacks, the WhatsApps, whatever's coming your way, and then having a portion of your evening to recap the day, plan tomorrow, and then just go about your afternoon and your whatever you normally do. Typically, you don't have to work. I mean, I'll say this carefully. You don't have to work the full 8 hours or 9 hours or 10 hours if you know exactly what are the most important things I need to tackle today, and you move and make progress every day. This is not a 4-hour work week thing. I think the funniest article I've read is that the fisherman in Mexico is fired for bankruptcy because the 4-hour work week isn't really a thing. But it's also, how do you be intentional with the energy that you have and the limited time that you have, and showing up intentionally versus showing up split-minded and trying to do everything at once.
I love that. I want to echo that response as loud as possible, prioritizing, and it's based on value and top down. For anyone on the team, hey, where can you put your value out there? Understand the hesitation on the 8-hour part, but I think it has the right message behind it of find the best places to apply your time for the day, your efforts, and make sure the value's there. You're knocking off different items all the way through. What do you think about AI and AI applications to this, and allowing yourself to be able to do more? I think there's some misconceptions for AI of, hey, I don't need to do anything anymore, as much as how can we be as effective as possible? How can we be as impactful as possible? What have you seen in terms of the best adoptions, applications of AI over the past year?
I'll give you two real examples. One gentleman is creating, I don't know exactly how it works, but because we're moving towards a cookieless future, he's able to create a predictive, he mentioned that this morning, like a predictive LTV, leveraging existing data and then being able to bid on predictive data. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. And I'm pretty sure he's going to be able to implement machine learning to create that predictive model. Another friend of mine, she runs an agency and a training program. And what she does is trains bots to be able to do what she does at scale. Like she manages probably like some accounts, millions a month in ad spend, to be able to have her brain be done by robots, but also have her strategy be implemented and not have her refresh the screen every day, or her team refresh the screen every hour, which you have to when you're managing at that spend. I think it's interesting to leverage effectiveness, not just to cut costs, but to increase the output of the current team. But then it can also create productization of existing services. Like for me, when I do a go-to-market strategy, a lot of my strategy is input output. And what would take me maybe 20 hours to do, I can now condense into 5 hours because I can use 100K tokens from like Claude to be able to digress or like process information. And this is like a private, not feeding the AI with information, but privately. And then a friend of mine's teaching me, like, you can create chains to connect those processes together to essentially create a 90% working strategy. And then when you come in, when your brain is actually needed, to finish with the 10%, the customization that matters the most. So I think there's interesting ways to be able to productize, definitely affect your business model and operational effectiveness. But I also wouldn't see it as replacement. I think anyone, and this is, I don't know, this is my point of view, I think if you're afraid of it or you're going on strike of it, it's like, no, I think the best, this is an analogy from another, like from home. If kids have to do, can't use AI for homework, they got to do different homework. Same thing. If you can't do your work anymore because of AI, or it's like irrelevant. You got to do better work or at higher value work, or find the 20% where your brain makes a difference, because AI only works in the background or based past data. It has to have existing data sets. We as humans have the beautiful capability of creating something that has potential. AI only creates what's actual. So we can create something that's completely brand new that didn't exist before. And AI can only work on what's existing. So leverage that, find that in what you're doing.
Absolutely. And I know it's a sensitive topic for some different verticals right now. And as you're saying, as a whole, look at how it could enhance what you're doing. You could put in that 20%, have the background on the 80%, and then it frees up, that much more time. You could do 5 times the amount of work. Uh, Speaking about multipliers, and as we begin to get to the later parts of the episode here, want to ask some questions about how businesses can 5x their growth based on your materials and your messages here, just growth as a whole. What are some things they could test out that could really turn into that meaningful increase for them? I know you've given some great examples in terms of how to build your model and the 4 parts to that. I imagine the answer lives somewhere around there, but something that listeners, viewers can activate on their own in terms of growth. What would be some good things for them to test out?
Okay. Well, past performance does not equal future guarantee. So we all know that, but I'll just tell you exactly what we did. And this is not like hundreds of thousands, like millions in top line and profit. So the simple things that we did and that we continue to do, I would base it around your profit levers. And this is everything we can do. Are there more than 7 profit levers? Maybe. I've only identified and leveraged these. So if you do more, please let me know. But going back to the task unit pricing and business model structure of knowing your average revenue, your number of clients, your labor efficiency, and your overhead costs, looking at what levers can you pull. And I wouldn't say focus on all 7 or even 3, just focus on 1 for this quarter, because when you naturally focus on 1, it'll increase, or you have to pull in the others. And the levers that you got to look at are LTV, specifically for service companies. Like, how are you going to increase stickiness and or create a moat around your services, not to capture clients, but keep clients and serving them at higher levels that other people or other agencies can't? How can you increase that LTV? And the 2 R's for LTV have to be relationship. Like, they have to be cool with you. You have to be cool with them. But the relationship alone is going to get you have to also get the results. So at the same time, like, how are you increasing LTV? What sticky products are you creating? What peripheral services can you add on? What relationship can you build with them so that you can stick around for the long term, versus just like, hey, we're 6 months in, peace out. Pricing was one that we discussed, like what variables come into your pricing, what you can influence there. And then within pricing, we talked about OpEx, labor efficiencies. Start looking at different tools, automations, AIs that you can use to increase efficiencies, not to decrease quality, because you still need quality control. It's not there yet. One interesting piece to look at too is sales volume. And this could be if you're selling specifically a productized service where it's like day in, day out, you do the same thing over and over and over again. How do you increase volume? How can you get to a different, I want to call it equilibrium in your sales volume, where you can start increasing profitability? I know for some agencies that are more on the recruitment side, talk to me, and their margins are tiny, but their only way to get out of that is through like massive scale. So maybe looking at that piece. Then the obvious on referrals, win back rate. I know you just mentioned that earlier, where a client came back to you. And then identifying when you get a win for a client, what upgrades or upsells can we do? What other problems come out from this engagement?
Excellent. And it's better than most of the recommendations I read online, I see online with YouTube videos, big YouTube consumer myself. But I then see companies fall short after that. 9 out of 10 startups fail the first year. Of those that survive, 9 out of 10 next year don't make it, based on stats that I follow. Small business as a whole, there's limited resources. So let's say a founder's listening in, maps all this out, is excited to get things going. A month, 3 months in, it's not working. There are not increases in measurements, KPIs, key performance indicators that are being tracked. The lifetime value, LTV is not increasing. What are the best ways to optimize? Could be the flip side too. It is working with flying colors, and now it's a matter of really refining everything before taking it to scale. But I find this problem-solving mentality can be missing at times when implementing a new structure. So I know we talked about this a bit earlier in terms of what to do, what it's not working, but I think it's a question that plays such a big negative impact in the space of small businesses and startups that deserves a second angle. So what are the best ways to optimize?
So I think based on your preface that for startups or small businesses getting started and testing, it's all around offer creation and identifying the key pain points within your marketplace for whom you're solving to and what the transformation is and how you're packaging that to a tangible offer that gets a result. Without that, it doesn't matter how cool your LTV plan is, doesn't matter how good your referral rate is. Like if you don't have a good offer that makes sense and that you can win business from, it's just not going to work. But that's more on the marketing and sales and positioning front. The key preface around offers and peak positioning is just identify within your target market the very specific who you're working with. What are their key desires of what they're trying to achieve, and what's triggering them to take action now, and how are you fulfilling that and getting results at the same time? Which is again building relationship and understanding who you're talking to and what you're actually selling. Because at the end of the day, we're not always selling services. We're selling something else that's intangible.
They're buying that result. And lastly, scale. I know you physically have built marketing and sales teams that have produced over 50 million in sales. You work with organizations, cohorts, clients. Any examples, any success stories for scale that you'd like to share, or any tips in how to do so?
For scaling for the digital marketing front,
digital marketing, overall business growth, wherever you'd like to take the question. I think it's what we're all after as entrepreneurs.
I think if you get the offer right and you get the right traffic or eyeballs to that offer, it's all about keeping in touch with the leading indicators, because we all care about the revenue or the outcome, but we rarely talk about the conversion rates and the ladder that leads them to get that outcome. So I think if you dial into what are the essential leading indicators, not the 5, not the 7, the 2 or 3 that matter the most, and strategizing and having teams report, if you can, automatically or weekly or daily around those, and make those your goals versus revenue goals versus outcome goals, which you frankly have zero control over if you don't know how they're coming out of nowhere.
Basing it on that value, having control over what you can, and that reflection of value to monetary assets being there as long as you built the model correctly. Awesome stuff. Raul, as we begin to wrap up here, first of all, I want to thank you for your time and coming on here. It's a real pleasure hearing your history, your experience, your models, and how it's implemented, had this value, had this growth for your clientele. And secondly, what is the best way for listeners to follow up with you, to look more into your systems and see if they can implement for themselves, as well as any final thoughts you want to leave them with?
Yeah, I think final thoughts are that your journey determines the destination. So never leave sight of that. To get in touch with me, dogoodwork.io is the website. Personal email is raul@dogoodwork.io. Email me, hit me up on LinkedIn, connect from there, and have a conversation, see what we can do to support you.
Awesome. Raul, thanks again. It's been a pleasure. I know I've been taking notes to discuss with my team and review later. I'm sure listeners have been as well. You are a true wealth of information here, and the value in terms of thought leadership is definitely clear. So really appreciate the time.
I appreciate you, Jason. This was fun.
Awesome. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We will see you next time.